here we have Lei joining us today.
Hello.
How are you doing today?
Good. How are you?
Pretty good. So very excited to talk about Covalent's new SDK tool that the team has built. And you might have already seen it on the docs page, but we're going to talk a little bit more on the background of the release and how Covalent has been committed to enhancing the developer experience and simplifying blockchain development. So for the listeners who aren't familiar with what an SDK is, could you give an overview?
Yeah, sure. So an SDK stands for Software Development Kit, and it's basically like a toolbox that gives developers everything they need to build an application. So if you contrast this to an API, which stands for Application Programming Interface, one of these is basically a little more enhanced or like out of the box, I would say, easier to use. So let's say you want to bake a cake. An SDK is like you going to the store and picking up cake mix that's already measured and it has like everything you need. You might just need to do a couple steps at the end to assemble it, basically. An API is more like the actual recipe. So the work's not done for you, it's just telling you how to do it, and then you would go and complete each of those steps.
Okay, so what were builders using before the SDK was built?
Yeah, so up until now, our main product has just been our unified API. So if you look on our docs on the code snippets on the right side of the API reference, where the shell dropdown is, that's what developers were using before, which is basically making HTTP requests. So you can see the URL there, you have your API key. It's a much more manual process that requires a lot more manual configuration and setup. So that's the way that our API was basically shown on our API reference. But what a lot of developers were actually doing is creating their own makeshift clients or like their own SDK. The issues with this is that they often miss out on a lot of the features that we have, or it's more maintenance for them. They shouldn't really have to go and build their own client. And when we release new things, those are often missed as well. So these things just get like out of date and deprecated a lot faster.
Okay. So instead of requiring developers to build their own, we've created one for them, correct?
Yeah, basically. So the SDK is just a much more efficient tool. We've done the build in-house so that everything's up to date and you have like the full range of features, and yeah.
What makes the SDK easier?
So the main thing is, instead of making HTTP requests, it's all function calls. So this is just like much easier steps. It's basically a much more programmer-friendly interface. Whereas before they would have to do a lot of that manual configuration and setup, like I mentioned. This requires a lot less code and it's just like easier integration, really quick to do with their project. And then there's a couple other benefits that are great with the SDK. One of those is pagination. So before, a lot of our endpoints are fixed to 100 items per page. And if you want to get all transactions for an address, for instance, you have to make a lot of separate API calls to get the first 100, the next 100, the next 100, the next 100. And all of that is done, it's kind of abstracted away with the SDK because you actually just use function generators in the background to handle pagination. So it becomes a lot easier than like making manual requests over and over and over. There's also just a consistent structure, which is nice because all of the endpoints that we offer are just grouped under different services. So it all looks the same, it's easy to use, built-in authentication, lots of other little things like that.
Okay, perfect. So I know that developers would want to see how to get started. Can you actually showcase a demo on what you need to do?
So it's actually live on our API reference. So basically you go to covalenthq.com/docs/API, where you can click up on the top corner. And you'll see in the code snippets beside each of the endpoints, we have TypeScript and Python. So those are the two developer SDKs that we have right now. And you can see the details of how to import it and get started. If you want more detailed instructions, you can also go read our blog post, which links to the actual TypeScript SDK and the Python SDK, and there's more documentation on each of those websites.
Okay, perfect. And if one wanted to sign up for the API, how would they do that?
Just go to our main website, or you can get there from any of our socials, wherever you find us, and then it's free to sign up. You just click get an API key on any of the pages that we have, and it'll take you to your dashboard. Put in your name and email, simple stuff, and yeah, then you're good to go.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you so much for walking us through this new tool built. If you have any questions, feel free to comment below or just reach out to us on our YouTube channel. But yeah, we'll catch you on the next product use case video.
Yeah, sweet.
Bye.